if you are at all interested in being remembered, and making a difference, coach. Teach and coach. You think of the people that have the biggest impact on your life is your teachers and your coaches. If you want to make a difference, if you want to have legacy and you want to be remembered, teach and
coach. Where we believe everyone deserves a stakeholder-centered leader. Welcome to Conversations with Coaches, where top executive coaches talk about the tools that shape their practice and then give them to you for free. This is a stakeholder-centered coaching production where we believe everyone deserves a stakeholder-centered leader. I'm Brandon Murgard, CEO and Master Coach, and I'll be your host as we take you inside the Coach's Toolbox. The best part of this season is that you get to keep all the tools. We're giving each resource to our listeners for free as part of our mission to measurably improve leadership effectiveness around the world. You can download all the tools here at mgscc.net/coach-toolbox. That's mgscc.net/coach-toolbox. And by the way, if you are a stakeholder-centered coaching certified coach, you already have all these tools inside of your SCC Coach portal. So get your tools today. Now, ladies and gentlemen, our distinguished guest today is none other than Mr. Chester Elton. Chester is no stranger to the world of broadcasting, thanks to his early involvement in broadcast radio in Canada. Since then, he's compiled quite an impressive resume. He's evolved into an executive coach, a best-selling author, and even the host of the popular podcast, Anxiety at Work. From his early days in radio to publishing 14 books, Chester's spent his life sharing the best of what he knows. His professional life took a soaring leap when he crossed paths with Marshall Goldsmith at a conference in Milan. This chance meeting opened the doors to the esteemed 100 Coaches community, setting the stage for a flourishing career in executive coaching. Despite this whirlwind professional life, Chester remains rooted in his faith, family, and friendships. A doting father to 4 and a proud grandfather to 3, he enjoys nothing more than spending quality time with his loved ones. As we embark on this discussion with Chester today, prepare to be inspired by his insights, experiences, and the unique blend of wit and wisdom he brings to the table. Welcome to the show, Chester.
Well, Brandon, that's quite an introduction. Thank you very much. It's a delight to be here, and as you know, a huge fan of stakeholder-centered coaching.
I love that. And Chester, I'm very grateful that you've given your time, and I'm also very grateful that you're giving your energy. And with that, I'd like to share a brief anecdote of our most recent interaction that took place in Tennessee. We're setting things up. We were at the Fisher Performing Arts Center at Belmont University. The conference we're attending is wrapped up, and we're standing in a group gathered around Alan Mulally, former CEO of Ford and Boeing, and one of Marshall's very dear friends. And as he's just fielding questions from us in this little circle, the staff are cleaning up. There's clamoring all around, and you came and joined the circle in this bright orange shirt and bright socks, bright orange glasses. And I don't remember, everything was orange. And as soon as you broke into that circle, the whole energy of the room just rose by like 40%. And you carried this air of, I'm not sure how to describe it, but it was, we're going to have a great time whether you like it or not. Like, this is going to be a blast and we're all going to have a great time. And it felt like a call to adventure and to joy. And it just seemed like everyone, even those who didn't know you, felt it and responded. And so since then, I've been very eager to get a chance to sit down and ask, what's with all the orange, Chester?
What's with the orange, buddy? Yeah, I grew up in Vancouver, Canada. I lived in New Jersey now for well over 30 years, and so I've got a lot of Jersey in me. It's like, hey, buddy, what's with the orange? What are you doing? Adrian Gostick is my co-author, and the first series of books that we wrote all had the word carrot in it. Our work is around creating these really engaging and grateful cultures, and so we wrote that, the managing with carrots, the 24 carrot manager, a carrot a day, perpetual calendar. That was a lot of fun, actually. And our best-selling book was called The Carrot Principle. Well, I'd never thought that I would be the orange guy, but carrots, generally speaking, are orange. And so people started sending me like orange socks and carrot birdhouses and all these crazy things. And so when I met Marshall, orange had started to kind of be my color. And people, once you start doing it, then they expect it. And if you don't show up, like, it's so funny. I started to wear orange socks everywhere. And went to church one day, and after church, my friend called me. He had 7 little girls. It was this beautiful little family. You just see them all in a row, right? He said, "Hey, Chester, I got to call you. My daughters were just so disappointed seeing you in church today." I go, "Oh, really? Did I inadvertently do something to offend them?" He goes, "No, you didn't. You didn't wear orange socks. I mean, they look forward to it every week." I thought, well, now I'm trapped, now. And so my wife actually, for her Facebook group, she took a picture of my sock drawer. They're all orange socks. And then Marshall, of course, my mentor and who's beyond delightful and kind. He always wears a green shirt. So I said, okay, well, I'll wear an orange shirt every day. And by the way, really easy to get dressed in the morning. All they've got to figure out is, do I wear blue jeans, black jeans, or gray jeans? And I've got the shirt and we're off. So orange has become our color. And I have to tell you, Brandon, it's a joyful color. You mentioned you come into the group and, really the colors in life in general have become really muted. They're browns and grays and blacks. And my kids used to give me a hard time. They go, "Dad, you're always wearing this bright orange." Until we would go to like a hockey game or we'd go to Disney World or something. And then they could always find me. I was the beacon that everybody could rally around. And I'll do this for you really quick, but I've become sort of an expert on the color orange, as you might guess, over the last 15 years. Orange is the one color that colorblind people can sometimes differentiate. So if you've got friends that are colorblind, not unusual for them to wear a lot of orange because it's kind of bright. Orange is the last color that disappears at depth. So a lot of diving watches have orange faces. It's the color of transition. There you go, your orange watch band. It's the color of transition, sunrise, sunset. The Orange Revolution in the Ukraine was because it's energy giving, and on and on and on. It's also the color of optimism, which I love. And so there's a lot of orange that makes a lot of sense, and I just find it joyful. Now, Rob Nail, a friend of ours who's part of the 100 Coaches, he was the CEO of the university out there in Silicon Valley. It'll come to me. Anyway, we were flying down. Yeah, what was it? No. It's anyway, it's this think tank for Silicon Valley. It'll come to me in a minute. Anyway, and we got to be good friends. Well, we were flying down to be with you in Nashville, and I'd nestled into my seat. And then about a few hours back, I hear this guy, "Hey, buddy, turn down that shirt. It's a little, it's a little bright." And I turn around, it's Rob. And so we sat together on the plane and had a great conversation. So, and people will ask me all the time, they'll say, like, "I noticed you had an orange shirt. And I noticed you had orange socks. But when you put on the orange glasses," I thought, I have to ask this guy, "What's with the orange?" So it's turned out to be a joyful and a really good brand. And, we learned from Marshall, if you're going to wear the green shirt, you wear the green shirt. Well, I wear the orange shirt. So long answer to a very simple question, but I hope that was fun.
Well, it is. I've been curious about it since we first crossed paths. And did you say you've been doing this for 15 years?
Well, Adrian and I have been writing books together for 22 years. And where the orange really kicked in was probably after about 4 or 5 years. And that's when I got into the orange trap. Now, Adrian doesn't. He was born in England, and he's very much more muted. And you won't see Adrian wearing a bright orange shirt, but that's the Englishman in him. Yeah.
Singularity
University. That's it. Rob Nail, who's beyond brilliant and a dear friend, and I love him to death.
Oh, that's such a good story. And thinking on the past 15 years, have you had any regrets about locking into orange, or has it really been as logistically simple as it seems? You just put on.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad you asked that. I actually love it. I embrace it, and friends and family. I'm so easy to buy for. you know, they'll come across random things that are orange, and they just show up in the mail. In fact, as we were saying before we hit record, we read a book launch in New York City with Hortense Le Gentil. She got a wonderful book called The Unlocked Leader. And it was so funny because friends that I hadn't seen in years that had flown in for it, as we're sitting there afterwards, they said, we knew you were here because we could pick you out of there. You were just this bright light. And then Hortense, we'd done some work with her book. She's very good friends with Ralph Lauren, who's in her book. And for my birthday, I don't know if you're going to use the video on here, but she said, I promised you a gift. And of course, it's this beautiful Ralph Lauren.
Oh, look at that.
Oh, I know. How beautiful is that, And Ralph Lauren was there at the book launch. So, it's so interesting, Brandon, and you know this from the 100 Coaches and the Stakeholder Centered Coaching. It's full of remarkably kind and generous people. And I came home last night, and my son was here with our grandkids, and I was sharing all this stuff, and Marshall was there, and Hortense was there, and Hubert, and on and on. He said, Dad, it's good for you to get out, because when you come back, you are so energized. And I said, you can't, and you know this from Nashville, you can't be with these coaches. You can't be, and it is so affirming, because your news feed on your phone will tell you that the world's coming to an end probably before lunch, and then you get out and you find there are wonderful people everywhere, and their mission through stakeholder centered coaching is to make the world a little better place, one leader at a time. And you've been doing it for decades, and I'm sure we'll get into that a little more. If you are at all interested in being remembered, making a difference, coach, teach and coach. You think of the people that had the biggest impact on your life. It was your teacher, over and above your family, which hopefully was positive, is your teachers and your coaches. If you want to make a difference, if you want to have legacy and you want to be remembered, teach and coach.
That's beautiful. And it's a good segue into my first question, Chester, which is, how did you get here? How did you go from what you were doing to actually becoming this person that you are today, shaping cultures, leading leaders? Give us the backstory.
Yeah, the way you phrased that reminds me of the old Talking Heads song. Well, how did I get here? And it's interesting. Adrian and I, we published our first book in 2000, and then we've written 14 books together since then. And we would present, and we'd put together workshops and training and so on. And we would get asked, do you coach? And I would say, I don't. And they'd say, well, why? You've got all this great material. And I said, I don't know how. I don't have a methodology. We've got a methodology for our research and our writing. We've got a formula for our training and workshops and so on. And it always kind of scared me a little bit. Well, enter Marshall Goldsmith. And we met in Milan, Italy. He and I were both presenting at the same conference, and we were having the dinner before with the speakers, and we were sitting together. And my wife came with me, my lovely wife Heidi. We just celebrated our 40-year anniversary, and it was so funny because so we're sitting there, and he's chatting with me, and my wife pointed out later. He said, Marshall really wasn't paying much attention to me. Now, my wife is very youthful. She's like, Dorian Gray. She's got the photo in the attic or the painting in the, she doesn't age, right? And so as we're talking, and Marshall, he says stuff that you probably shouldn't say out loud, And he says to me, so how did you two meet? I said, oh, we met at university. We both went to BYU. He says, oh, I thought for sure she was your second wife. And I went, he's thinking this sweet young thing is my trophy wife. I said, no, we've been married for like 33 years. And he goes, oh, and he said, and it was so funny because Heidi then said, at that moment, all of a sudden I had value. Now he paid attention to her because I hadn't dumped my previous wife for the sweet young thing. This was the sweet young thing of 33 years or whatever it was at the time. So I laughed and I said, Marshall, you probably shouldn't say stuff like that out loud, And by the way, a wonderful compliment to my wife for her youthful look, but I don't know what that says about me that you would think that I would have dumped my first wife. Yeah, I know. So anyway, so at this dinner, Marshall had called me some months before and said, "Hey, Chester, we're putting together this leadership group, this coaches group. And we're going to call it the MG100. And I'd love to invite you to be a part of it. Can you be in wherever it was?" And I said, "No, I've actually got an engagement." She goes, "No problem. Click." Marshall is very efficient in his career. I was like, wow. So he says, "Hey," and I said, "Hey, what about that leadership thing you mentioned?" He goes, "Oh, you should come. In December, we're having a thing at the World Bank, and it's Dr. Jim Kim. It's going to be amazing." I said, "Yeah, it sounds great." He says, "Can you be there?" And I looked at my calendar. I said, "Yeah, I could. Yeah, I live in Jersey. It's DC. It's not that far away, and I could rearrange some travel." And yeah, I said, "I think that'll work. Tell me what it is." He says, "It would take too long. Just come." I said, "Yeah, seriously, Marshall, like, what is it?" Like, what does this group do? He goes, "Chester, just trust me. Just come. And you'll figure it out when you get there." So I went, "Yeah, sure, what the heck," so I'll go. And I knew Marshall not particularly well at that point. And I knew him, and we had friends that were friends, and they, everybody speaks so highly of him. I thought, sure, I'll take a flyer. It's, it's a day or two out of my life. And it was this fabulous meeting with Dr. Jim Kim at the World Bank. And the people in the room were just remarkable. And I remember Marshall sent out all their resumes, and I met him as we were going through security. And I said, "Marshall, thank you for sending out those resumes. This is an impressive group." And he looked at me and he said, "I know what you're thinking." I said, "Really? What am I thinking, Marshall?" He says, "You're thinking you don't belong." I said, "Well, it wasn't lost on me that I'm not the president of the World Bank, and I don't own an NBA basketball team," and then went down the list of all these amazing people. And then, and this is Marshall, ever the coach, right? He said, "Chester, I wouldn't have invited you if you didn't belong. Welcome to the group." And I sat there and yeah, I know. I mean, isn't that just the perfect thing to say? And then it was funny when it was all done. I was talking to my wife. She said, "How was it?" I said, "It was amazing." I said, "I don't know how I got in the room, to tell you the honest truth, but I will tell you this. I'm not leaving." You're going to have to drag me out feet first. Well, in this whole, welcoming and ridiculously kind and generous community, Frank Wagner pops up. And he says, "Chester, just love, your books and all the wonderful things you're doing. Are you coaching?" And I said, "Frank, I don't know how to coach. I don't have a methodology." He goes, "Not a problem. We're offering a certification for the stakeholder-centered coaches. And I've got a workshop in Jersey City coming up, which is, 20 minutes from my house. Would you like to come?" I said, "Oh, Frank, I would love to come." And of course, Frank Wagner is the coach of coaches, right? He's been doing this. I think he invented coaching. He and Marshall really invented the whole genre. And we had so much fun. He and his chief of staff at the time, I can't remember her name. I'm Canadian. It all comes back to hockey. I got tickets to a New Jersey Devils hockey game, and we went to the game. And Frank and I have become fast friends and gone back and recertified 2 or 3 times. And now I had a methodology. Now I had a roadmap. And I often talk with Frank that, when you speak and you write, you're preaching to the masses. And that's important, right? When you coach, it's like you're ministering to the one. And the ripple effect of coaching to these senior leaders, the way it ripples through their organizations and their teams, has a dramatic impact. And so, yeah, I love, Marshall and I, we love the stage. Why wouldn't you? It's a lot of fun, and we make it fun. And yet I think the most important work we do is through the coaching, because you get to go deeper and it's more time. It's not 60 minutes on stage. It's 6 months. It's 12 months. And I know you know this too, Brandon, being the CEO, is that the executives that you coach often become dear friends. They often become dear friends, and friendship is very high on my motivator scale. So, and I said it to him last night. I said, Marshall, I can't thank you enough for inviting me to be a part of this group, because some of my nearest and dearest friends are in the 100 Coaches community, and I never would have met them had it not been for you and your kindness. Yeah.
I think it's very easy with this group to walk in. I mean, with any sampling of the people in the group, to feel like the least accomplished person in the room at any given point with any given list of members. And it sounds like you had that feeling the first time you saw kind of that first permutation of the group. Yes.
Oh yeah. And again, Marshall, ever the coach, because there was Gail Miller, who is one of the kindest people you'll ever meet, and her husband built this huge empire of car dealerships and movie theaters, and they bought the Utah Jazz and the whole bit. We had yeah, I know they owned an NBA. And I'm sitting there, and I'm thinking, what? And her wonderful son, Brilliant Miller, and we've become friends as well. And he said to me, he goes, Chester, it's all a matter of perspective. For example, you say, oh man, they own an NBA franchise. You know what Gail Miller's saying? She's saying, ooh, Chester Elton, he sold 1.5 million copies of his book. Like, how cool is that? So, it's kind of like, so don't shortchange yourself. Like, you sell 1 million books. That's a big deal. I go, okay, I'm in. You're right. I totally deserve to be here. And on and on. So it is a matter of perspective, right? He says, it's so funny. They've got all these really accomplished business leaders and stuff. And you know what they all want to do? I said, what is? They all want to write a book. And you've written a whole bunch. So you're oddly enough, you're in awe of them. They want to be you. And I thought that was just such a fun way to express it. And it's been great.
It is. There's such symbiosis in what we're all doing, and it's such an intellectually driven group.
I would interrupt you on that. Intellectually driven, absolutely. It is more emotionally driven than any group I've ever been a part of. They're super smart people, so you're right. The intellectual, like the discipline, their accomplishments and how they do it. It's the emotional side that makes it magical, because everybody checks their ego at the door. Like everybody. And their mission is, how can I make your day a little better? How can I help you sell a few more books? How can I help you get another coaching contract? Because there's that emotional connection that says, what you, and we say this to each other all the time, or tons. Your book, this, The Unlocked Leader, is a message that's so important for people. How can we help you amplify that message? And they'll turn right around and say, Chester, the world needs more orange. We need more gratitude. And what can we do? And so absolutely, you're right. There's an intellectual foundation that is extraordinary. It's the emotional connection, I think, just in my humble opinion, that makes it magical.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. And to your credit, what you mentioned earlier is, if you want to make a difference, coach. And I think that the coaching is a strong link between that combination of the emotion and the intelligence and the wisdom, and actually the implementation of it. Coaching really does bridge that gap. Well, so you came in and said, I don't have a methodology. Frank put stakeholder-centered coaching in your hand. And then on the back side of that program, did you feel, okay, now I can go out and apply the things that I've done? Did you feel like, okay, I've got a little sliver and I need a lot more? What was your experience going through that process?
Excellent question, Brandon. Yeah, I, intellectually, I understood it. It's a very simple system, and it's beautiful the way it's just outlined, courage, humility, and discipline, and the 7 steps and stakeholders and all that. I mean, it as you introduce your coachees to it, like, they get it right away. And the simplicity is beautiful. The execution is really hard, right? Because you got to stick to it, and you've got an accountability partner and so on. So I came away intellectually going, hey, this is going to be really cool, with absolutely no confidence that I could actually do it. And then Frank just said, was great. He said, just start doing it and you'll figure it out. And as you would know better than anyone, and then you bring your experience and you bring your methodology that adds to it. No stakeholder-centered coaching coach, I think, coaches the same way. There's the flow and there's the discipline, and yet in that, of course, we introduce a lot of gratitude, which is which is part of the stakeholder centered coaching, right? Whenever you get feed forward, what's the only answer you give? Thank you. Well, that's great. That's gratitude, right? And that's a great little discipline. That is one of those moments with executives that's an amazing breakthrough. Don't don't defend your answer. Don't justify your behavior. Just say thank you and move on. It's just so powerful, right? And by the way, I use that with my kids, my grandkids, and my wife all the time. They'll say, pop up, you shouldn't do this thing. Thank you. Thank you for telling me. And in a way, it kind of frustrates them because, they kind of, sometimes people want to fight. And when you don't fight and you're gracious, they kind of go,
yeah. Or they want judgment. They want you to say, great idea, good suggestion.
Yeah. So anyway, and so it was, and the community is really great about saying, hey, look, we've got a guy that we think would be a good match. Why don't you talk to him? And we started to coach, and now it's literally the best part of my day when I see had a coaching session earlier today, and it's the best part of my day to get to interact with those people and make a suggestion as to what you might do and then follow up. It's great.
Yeah, and you go in knowing exactly what's going to happen too, right? There's rarely procedural surprises. You might have surprises of input and environment or something, but have you heard, so Frank's perspective on stakeholder-centered coaching and how he describes it has also evolved since, and as long as I've known him. Have you heard him describe it as an operating system by chance?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, early on, it's so interesting you mentioned it because I'm about to do a thing with Frank to go through it again. It's one of those things where refresher courses are so great, and the material is so detailed and helpful, because you coach for a while, and like anything, you get a little lazy, and you maybe shortcut a little bit, and then you go back and they walk you through. And they go, yeah, you know what? I've got to be more disciplined. I got to make sure that I keep doing that piece. I'll tell you a funny story about Frank. So, as you know, Marshall is in the Thinkers 50 Hall of Fame or whatever they call it, and got the Thinkers 50. This is this organization in London. It's very prestigious, and every other year they rank these leaders and so on. So a while ago, we all went to London and had a great time. And he got him to do the Thinkers 50 top 50 coaches, and I got on the list, and I was just so honored. And they published the list. And Marshall called me. We were talking about something. I said, hey, by the way, I can't believe I'm this, Thinkers 50, top 50 coaches in the world. And I said, and I can't believe I'm like number 12. In fact, I'm ranked like way ahead of Frank Wagner. Like, how did that happen? And he laughs and he says to me, Chester, it's alphabetical. Elton is going to be way higher than Wagner.
Yeah.
And I laughed so hard. We had such a kick. I said, well, now that you've told me that, you and I know that, I'm still telling my friends I'm number 12.
Oh, that's so funny, Chester. Have you told Frank that story?
Yeah, I did. I said, Frank, and then he said that, I said, well, that makes all the sense in the world, because there's no way in any universe I get ranked higher than Frank. I mean, I wouldn't even be a coach without Frank Wagner, and he laughed. So we had such a good laugh about that. It was funny. So, and this again is the 100 Coaches community that keeps expanding and making executive coaching much more mainstream. We talk about this all the time that, when I first got in business, if an executive got a coach, it was sort of the last gasp effort to save his or her career. Like, in fact, you'd even say, ooh, so-and-so's got a coach. Yeah, I think I'm going to apply for that job because it's going to be open in a couple of weeks, right? So constantly promoting the profession and making it mainstream. And now, you go into organizations and they'll say, "Hey, how come you've got a coach and I don't have a coach?" What did I do something wrong? So again, I just come back to an amazing community and Marshall and Frank, who's done more for executive coaching than those two guys? I can't think of anybody. Yeah.
Yeah. What's funny is we're now in season 2, and I think we have yet to have an episode where someone hasn't said, I think one of the most influential people in my career has been Frank. He's just this is almost a celebration of Frank's impact on people.
As our conversation unfolds, you may be wondering, what is this whole stakeholder-centered coaching thing? It's a leadership development process that guarantees leaders become both recognized and acknowledged as more effective leaders by key stakeholders in 12 months or less. Nearly 5,000 coaches have been trained in this methodology. The coaching program is designed to build functional expertise from 3 stages: intellectual, practical, and applicable on the job. In addition to graduating with the most rigorous, research-driven coaching methodology on the market, you'll also walk away with measurable coaching results and a lifetime certification to show for it. We don't just believe in what we do, we stand behind it. And that's why we are giving away complimentary access to the first stage of the training to anyone listening to this podcast. Get your very own access code today by visiting mgscc.net/sample-course. Let's tune back into the interview.
Okay, good. So you've become an executive coach through this incredible roller coaster that sounds like it started in Milan and has continued through to present day. What were some of the challenges that you've noticed along the way that you set out to solve with this tool?
Well, such an insightful, way to look at it, Brandon, because, you look at leaders today, and, Adrian, my co-author, we've been studying, culture and leadership for over 2 decades now. And if you'd asked us even 5 years ago, pre-COVID, what are the attributes of great leaders? You'd say, well, a great communicator, a great motivator, gets things done, moves the ball forward or whatever, lots of analogies. Now, and I think, it was starting before COVID, but certainly COVID accelerated the process, is that coaching, the biggest obstacle is getting coaches to be more empathetic and be more human. In his brilliant book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There, the 22 things that most leaders work on. One is that I've always got to be right, that I've got to be the smartest person in the room. They have problems delegating and so on. Well, that's a lack of empathy, right? A lack of really leading humans as opposed to leading workers or associates or whatever designation you use for your employee workforce. So the biggest obstacle really is to have people step back, at least I'm finding, and say, there is no barrier between your work life and your personal life. So when people walk through the door, you are leading the whole person. And you've got to be disciplined about knowing their story. Where did they come from? How did they get here? What do they want to accomplish while they're here? And where do they want to go? And I'm going to try to condense this as quick as I can. I love reading the books from the 100 Coaches community and on. But, there's a wonderful book written called Bowling Alone, and it's sort of the history of American society. And I think it's the history of most Western societies, at least. That, our parents were very social. They belonged to clubs and charities and, the Kiwanis Club and the Knights of Columbus and the Elks Club and, the Masons and so on. Everybody went to church. And I remember my mom had a bridge club and my dad, was in a tennis group and on and on. And what his work says is that over time, a lot of these have declined or disappeared. I love the title Bowling Alone. There's no more bowling leagues. But I like to knock over the pins, And so what is replacing that? Well, Bob Waldinger is the managing director of this incredible study at Harvard, over 80 years long, about what creates a long, happy and healthy life. His wonderful book, The Good Life, came out, I think, February this year. The number one determining factor of a long, happy and healthy life is meaningful relationships. Well, if fewer people are going to church, that's a community. If fewer and fewer people are in bowling leagues, that's a community, your bridge club, and you get the drift, right? What is replacing that community? And I would submit that it's work. Now, and particularly with, our smartphones and so on, the work is 24/7, right? It's the work day somewhere because work is so global. I mean, it may be the end of the day for me here. It's the beginning of the day in Singapore, right? So this delineation. So where do I go to find my community? Work has replaced a lot of that, and you're seeing it in companies offering, more benefits and counseling, and clubs like the best place to start your career, the best place for working mothers, the best place for, women in leadership, and on and on. So now, as a leader, it's so interesting that people aren't expecting you to just be a leader and just make them a better worker. You are now their coach. You are their teacher. You are their mentor. You're not just the leader. You're their father confessor, right? You're now you're the psychologist and so on, which, by the way, is a heavy lift. That's asking a lot of people, right? So as a coach, you come in and say, look, you're not going to be able to be all those things. I will be able to teach you with your stakeholders and the methodology how to lead better in that ridiculously different environment than you probably grew up in, right? And we're going to teach you how to be more human. We're going to teach you how to connect. We're going to teach you how to ask more questions. We're going to teach you how to make it safe for people to give you feedback, which of course we call feed forward. And I love doing this at the beginning of every coaching engagement. I tell the coachees, look, if we just make you a better leader, we will have failed you. We want to help you become the person that you want to be, a better person. So write this quote down on a little Post-it note and put it up in the upper right-hand corner of your laptop. And it goes like this. No success in business can ever compensate for failure in your home. And isn't that powerful? As a religious philosopher named David O. McKay years ago, he said it in like the 60s, right? However prescient was that. So what I love doing is at the end of every coaching session, I'll say, okay, we've gone through this with, let's say it's feed forward or delegation, or as you might guess, gratitude is a big part of my coaching. How are you going to take that principle home and apply it to your marriage, to your partner, to your kids? And the best feed forward that I think you can get as a coach is when you're wrapping it all up, whether it's a 6-month engagement or a year-long engagement, when they say, yes, I've got better leadership scores. I've got a more engaged and productive team. More than anything, I just want to thank you. I've got a better relationship with my spouse. I've got a better relationship with my kids. It doesn't get any better than that, right?
Oh, yeah. I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, coaching to me is a way to affect families. I see everything going on. Well, everything that has gone on for, however long people have been around. I think many of these successes and failures can be attributed back to the family. And we see, as you say, people's communities are disappearing. So they go home with all of that longing, that stress, that desire to connect. And who do they trauma dump it on? It's the people in their house. It's the proximity. And if we can fix that with things like feed forward and just really simple tools like saying thank you, like asking what to get better at rather than just using your intuition. But let me pause and say, Chester, what is feed forward for those who are unfamiliar with it?
Yeah, it's a very simple, it's a very simple way of taking feedback and I think making it more positive. Whenever I coach this, I say, look, it's very Shakespearean. Would a rose by any other name smell as sweet? And the answer is no, a rose smells better. Like a rose is it's a good name. Use that, right? Is that, feedback is looking backwards and you can't change the past. So what I want to give you is feed forward, starting here, going forward, what you can do, to make it better. And I love that perspective. We did a deep dive on anxiety in the workplace. And it was really interesting as we talked to counselors. They say, depression is worrying about the past. And the reason that is depressing is because you can't change it. There's nothing you can do. You just have to live with it, right? Anxiety is worrying about the future. So, how you deal with both those is try to be as present as possible. And of course, that's a big part of stakeholder coaching is being present, listening, being grateful, saying thank you. So feedback is looking back at things you can't change, mistakes you may have made. Feed forward is, now I'm going to give you the tools moving forward so that you can have a more positive and safe place to work. Did I do a good job? You're the CEO. So give me some feed forward here.
Well, hey, your ability to define and articulate feed forward is a measure of my success as the CEO, making sure our coaches are well equipped to talk about the tools effectively. And I think you did a great job. Yes. So feed forward, it's a critically important tool. And if I were staring down the barrel of this challenge, saying we need to make coaches be more human, we need to make leaders understand that they're leading the whole human, what are some of the tools that you recommend and have brought today for someone to explore who wanted to take a whack at solving some of these challenges?
Yeah, well, obviously, inherent in the stakeholder-centered coaching is there are a lot of tools, and as you mentioned, they're available to coaches in the portal and so on. A lot of those come from Marshall's brilliant book, "What Got You Here Won't Get You There," and so that's one of the tools that I utilize right away. I said, look, read this, and I'll pull out certain chapters that I specifically want them to look at. And of course, one of the great tools in that book is the list of 23. I think it's 22, but I always add 20. How many is it? 21. Yeah, okay. It's 21. My list is 22 because I need to give more gratitude. So I always add one at the end, which was conspicuously missing, by the way. Anyway, and we'll go down that list and I'll say, pick 4 things that you would like to work on. Give me 4 things you'd like to work on. And then let's narrow that down to 2 things that we're going to work on, because you can't work on 4 things. That's way too much. We can maybe work on 2. And if we get really good at maybe one of them, feel good about, we may go back and grab one of those others. So that's a wonderful tool in narrowing down where we want to focus on changing your behavior. One of my favorite tools from Marshall and Frank is the question, what do you think is easier to change, perception or behavior? And I remember Marshall walking me through this, and I said, oh, I think behavior is really hard to change. He goes, yeah, you got that wrong. He said, with the right tools and an accountability part, you can change your habit very quickly. I said, yeah, I think that's true, because I remember when I was younger, I used to swear a lot, and I really wanted to stop swearing. And he said, well, did you? And I said, oh, yeah, I got really good at it. I stopped swearing several times,
Lots of practice.
Yeah. And that whole thing about perception, which is so great. And then you explain why it's important to have stakeholders that you check in with. And of course, personal examples that we can use that, with our kids that resonate with people. I remember, was it Frank that said, hey, Chester, if you want to have fun, text your kids and say, how can I be a better dad? And see what they say. It probably was Frank, right? So I did it. I'm always up for an experiment. And I have 4 adult children at this point. And 3 of my kids, we do this all the time. Oh, you're the world's greatest dad. Don't change a thing. In other words, I don't want to play. I know this is a game and you're not going to trick me into doing this again. My engineering son, Brendan, responded. He said, Dad, I'm really glad you asked. And he was, going at school out west, and I would have business out there, and I'd always come see him. And there were other kids in our neighborhood that were there, and we'd take him for pizza or we'd go to a movie or whatever. He'd say, I love it when you come out to visit. The thing is you always invite other kids from the neighborhood. And so when it's finally time for you and I to have some one-on-one time, you've been traveling, you've been working, and you're kind of exhausted, and I don't really feel like I get your attention. And even when I'm home, I have a home office, and I'd come in and I always felt like you were kind of multitasking, and I never. So if you want, my feedback, it would be that could you be more present? And I went, oh gosh, that's. So of course I responded, well, thank you. Now I missed a step because I changed my behavior. And when I went out, I'd always make sure it was just me and him. And he'd come into my office. I'd close my laptop when he was in town. I'd make sure it was maybe just me and him that went to the hockey game, or just me and him that went to the movie, What I didn't do is I didn't check back with him. And I didn't tell him specifically what I was going to do. So after about 6 weeks, I said, hey, buddy, you said, how do you think I'm doing? He goes, haven't seen a change. My immediate reaction is, you've got to be kidding me. I have gone to great lengths to change my behavior. Again, Marshall and Frank in my ear, just say thank you. And then I realized I'd missed that step. And I said, okay, I'll tell you what, Brendan, I'm going to work on it really hard. And here's what I'm going to do. When you come into my office, I'm going to close my laptop, put my phone away, and it's just you and me. I'll make sure when you're here that you and I do something just you and me. And when I come out to visit you, I'll make sure that we have one-on-one time. Deal? He goes, deal. And then, every 2 or 3 weeks, I'd check in and I'd say, remember, I was going to do this and this is how am I doing? Oh, you know what? I have noticed. So at the end of the next 6 weeks, I said, so how am I doing? He goes, Dad, you're killing it. You're killing it. Well, I got no credit for the first 6 weeks, right? Like zero. My behavior was consistent. I didn't check in. And that's really powerful, I think, in the stakeholder, is when you check in and people say, I have noticed you are getting better. In fact, on a scale of 1 to 5, you've gone from a 2 to a 4. Well, that's incredible validation. So, and again, a family experience that I think we can all kind of relate to, because we go way out of our ways to make sure that we're the world's greatest parent, and we get no credit for it if we don't do it right,
And if you do it right, it's a pretty thankless job. And if you do it right, they still just remember the things you didn't do right, right? Well, what can you do? No, it's a good realization. I think the real value you're touching on here is that, you're not getting business inputs. You're not having a consultant come along and solve a unique problem and they leave and that impact is limited. You're being given these tools that can apply to any relationship you've got, to make them not just better, but measurably better through their eyes. And it can go anywhere that you're going with your relationships. And that's really important. So how have you sustained this? Are you still getting those good scores from your son?
Yeah. My wife and I have a daily practice, actually, and we talk about what are 3 things you're grateful for today, and of course it leads to conversations. How am I doing? My wife and I are very different, and I think that's why it works so well. When I'm bothered or something, I want her ear. I want her around. When she's bothered or something, she wants time alone. And I early in our marriage, I learned that the hard way. And so just the other day, I could tell I said, so just checking in, do you need some alone time? She'd go, yeah. Yeah. And that's all she has to say. It's just, yeah, no eye contact. And I'm like, got it. See ya. Yeah. There's that DMZ, that you want to make sure you give some space. And it's great. It's great. It's made me a better husband. It's made me a better dad. Made me a much better grandpa. Before we jump, you ask what are some of the tools that you give your coachees. I literally have a group of 5 books, and I don't give them to them obviously all at once. You can't read 5 books. You read it one at a time. And I start them off with what got you here won't get you there. It's a great introduction to becoming coachable, and be coached. I love the book The Good Life. And I'm a big fan of Audible, by the way. If you've got any kind of a commute or a workout regimen, or you go for long walks, Audible is spectacular. And The Good Life is, again, what creates a long, happy, and healthy life. And I think that's, ultimately what we want. The third book that I can't recommend more is Clayton Christensen, who wrote a brilliant book called The Innovator's Dilemma. That's not the book. His last class at the Harvard School of Business every year was How Will You Measure Your Life? It's a short book. It's a brilliant book. It answers 3 questions. How will you develop a career that is meaningful and that you love? Right? How will you love your work? 2, how will you continue to develop great relationships, which ties right back to the Harvard study in the book, The Good Life. And the third one I love, and how do you live a life of integrity and stay out of jail? I love that last little bit, because, you're Harvard School of Business. Lots of Harvard School of Business grads have ended up in jail, because they forgot to live a life of integrity. And one of the great lines in his book is, be careful when someone asks you to do something just this once. A compromise just this once, because if you do it once, then they'll know you'll do it again, right? So those books are wonderful. And then my two books that I know we're not here to sell, but Leading with Gratitude, which I think is a great way to lead and to live, and Anxiety at Work, How Do You Deal with Mental Health? And then the bonus book that I love, who is also a member of the 100 Coaches, as by the way, is almost every book that I just mentioned, oddly enough, is Michael Bungay Stainier's book, The Coaching Habit. 7 great questions. And what that teaches you to do is ask good questions and listen. Ask good questions and listen. So those, I think, are very powerful tools. And I've read every one of those books multiple times and will continue to as part of my coaching discipline.
And you're giving away a free chapter. Which of the books is that chapter coming from?
Yeah, Anxiety at Work, the chapter, I think, it's the number one issue in the workplace, particularly if you're managing a lot of millennials and Gen Z. It's a wonderful first chapter that just talks about the anxiety dilemma, and loneliness being such a big part of anxiety in the workplace. And the first chapter there and the first chapter of Leading with Gratitude. If you like those chapters and you decide to get the book, I would encourage you to go to Audible on Leading with Gratitude. The foreword is actually written and spoken by Marshall. The book was actually his idea, which was really, really funny. It's a longer story that we don't have time for. It was his idea. I said, you wrote this great book with all these, chapters. It was Work is Life Made Visible, which is a great book. And a lot of chapters were written by different members of the community. And he said, read it. And if you would, promote it. We've got a big following on LinkedIn. I said, sure. He said, what did you think of the book? I said, I loved it. And I loved that I knew a lot of the contributors, but I'm really surprised you didn't have a chapter on gratitude. He said, what do you mean? I said, your whole philosophy is thank you. Get feet forward, be open, to have the courage to ask for, how can I be better? And the answer is thank you. And it was so funny, he says, Marshall never shies away from a little publicity, says, well, Chester, you're the world's leading authority on gratitude. I'm the world's greatest executive coach. We should write a book together. And I said, are you serious? And anyway, because of happenstance, it turned out that he could write the foreword and help us promote it. He couldn't because he was working on a bunch of other projects. But we would have never written Leading with Gratitude had it not been for Marshall. And it's my favorite book. And it is the attitude. It is the discipline of gratitude that I think is the common thread through every great leader, team, and culture that we studied. And certainly a part of becoming coachable and becoming a great coach is these gratitude practices. So it all comes back to Marshall. You know this, Brandon. All roads lead to Rome. Well, all coaching leads back to Marshall at some point, and delightfully so, right?
Oh, we're very fortunate for that. I mean, like you said, it's good to read these books, know the people, not just by name, but by face and by their families and their personalities. And you've also done quite a bit more work with your podcast, which shares the name of this book. So tell us a little bit about your show.
Yeah, another couple of tools that we're offering up that we're very proud of is our podcast, Anxiety at Work. We bring in business leaders, we bring in psychologists, psychiatrists, counselors. It's a delight. And they not only do they share what they're writing or thinking or practices that have made a difference, they also share their personal wellness practices, which I always find fascinating. And as you might guess, a lot of it has to do with exercise and sleep and eating well. One of my favorite wellness practices was a business leader that said, when I get really anxious, what really helps me? Multitasking. He said, for most people that increases anxiety. She said, yeah, the thing is, I get so busy, I don't have time to be anxious. So, everybody has their ways of dealing with mental health and being mentally healthy. And then the last one is, we have a wonderful following on LinkedIn, and every other week we publish the Gratitude Journal. And we highlight many of the people that we've talked about on the podcast. And we're so delightfully surprised. We have 296,000 subscribers, which just blows my mind away. I've got to figure out a way how to get each one of them to send me $1 every month. just $1. It'd be great. It's free, and I would love you to subscribe there. And then we do highlight our podcasts and some of the other things we do. So it's a great repository of just wonderful people, great thinking, and hopefully some encouragement.
I mean, it's meaningful work. It really is, and it's especially needed now because we have so many business tools to help us run our businesses more effectively, but we are lacking in kind of foundational mental health tools to help us stay healthy. So, on that note, I mean, what are you doing in your personal life to keep yourself grateful, to keep yourself anxiety free or minimized?
Yeah, anxiety free, I think, is a bar that's just a little too high for most of us, right? If not all of us. Thank you for asking. You know, my wife and I have this wonderful practice. We ask each other at the end of the day, what are your three? I also, in the morning, and it started, I text out just a positive message to a bunch of people. It started with my dear cousin out in Arizona who's had a stroke, and he's not in good health, and it's just really hard to watch. And I said, you know, buddy, I know that when this happens, there's this rush of goodwill and help, and then people get back to their regular lives. And I don't want you to ever think that you're not in my thoughts and prayers. And so I would text him a little something every morning. Well, more and more people found out about it. So now, Brandon, I text like 50 plus people every morning. Now I've gotten really good at it. It only takes me about 15 minutes. It's nice to get, you know, their responses and little hearts and thumbs up and little comments. It's also really good for me, you know, that little thought. And of course I repeat it, you know, 45, 50 times. So it's really drilled in for the day. Over and above that, I've been a real fan of journaling over the years. I have 40 plus journals. I'm very old fashioned. I like the paper journal. I like a fountain. I've got a fountain pen that I use. It's very romantic, I think, and it works for me. And Adrian and I, at the end of the year, are going to have our own gratitude journal. I kept saying, Adrian, I've got all these gratitude journals and stuff. I can't believe we don't have our own. You know, so that's going to come out called The Gratitude Habit, 90 Days to a More Grateful Life. And we're excited to have that and give it to our coachees and
That's amazing.
And people that are important to our lives.
Do you have a URL for that already?
We don't. We're finishing up the graphics and everything this week. If you go to LinkedIn and you sign up for our gratitude journal, it'll always be there. Follow us on LinkedIn. We're on all the platforms, but LinkedIn is really where we placed our bet. We've got Instagram, we've got Twitter and Threads, and all the fun stuff. We really early on placed our bet on LinkedIn, and it's served us well. So and our regular website, which is thecultureworks.com. So we're not hard to find.
And if someone wanted to get in touch with you, how would they reach out?
You know, I know this isn't commonly done. I actually enjoy it. My email is very simple. It's chester@chesterelton.com. And if you're looking for a coach, or you're an aspiring coach and you just want a little heads up, how do you do it, or you're looking for somebody to speak at your conference or whatnot, drop me a note. I answer all my emails. Connect with me through LinkedIn. Feel free to do that. And I'm such a big fan of stakeholder-centered coaching. Just seriously, if you want the scoop, we've been doing it for years now. It is life-changing. I remember I had a chance to be with Frank down in Nashville, and I always give him a big hug, and I'll say, Frank, there are people in my life that have been absolute game changers. My family, clearly, my father and my brothers, teachers I've had and coaches. In my adult life, no one has had a bigger impact on my life for the better than you and Marshall Goldsmith, and I will be forever and eternally grateful. And that's the moment we give each other big hugs, and it's just a great moment. And I know we're wrapping up. The one thing that I want to share with your listeners is something Marshall and I have been talking about over the last little while. And that is as a coach or as a leader, whatever it is you do, we all want to change the world. And that's a ridiculously high bar. and rarely achieved. Mother Teresa, okay, I'll give you that one, right? Buddha, Muhammad, Jesus, okay, it's a small group. I don't know what class they're in, but it doesn't take long to call the roll. You know what I mean? And yet we say to ourselves, but I want to change the world. And say, great, and you should swing for the fences. The thing is that if you're lucky, what you can create for people are good moments. Good moments, as many good moments as you can. And Marshall and I have decided to call it a good minute. Give people a good minute. And sometimes in the crush of their day and what's going on with their family, a good minute is all they need. Because what does it mean? It means somebody was paying attention. Somebody cared about me enough to send me that text or sit down with me and say how you're doing, or send me a book or send me an article or whatever. And if you create enough good minutes, the ripple effect of those good minutes it can go further than you'd ever imagine. And as Marshall and I were having this conversation, a dear friend of mine had recently passed away, and they're of the Jewish faith. And so my wife and I went down to sit Shiva with them. And we were talking about this good minute. And I said, honey, we're going to sit with them, and there's no way we can even hope to take away their pain. It's impossible. Our goal is to just create a couple of good minutes for them where they can relax and maybe laugh a little bit, give them a big hug, take away their pain for a minute or two or three. So as leaders, as you embark upon being coaches, don't worry about changing the world. Very few people meet that standard. Just decide that today I'm going to do all I can to create as many good minutes as I can. And as Marshall would say, take the win. Take the win.
Beautiful. Well, Chester, your reputation filled the room before you arrived, and you've still managed to exceed that. So thank you so much for being here, for sharing your time. For those of you who are listening on your commute, tuning in at the gym, or watching here on YouTube, if you have a question or would like to recommend a guest, drop me an email to podcast@mgscc.net. And if you like the tool and want to get a hold of this chapter summary, you can get that at mgscc.net/coach-toolbox, mgscc.net/coach-toolbox. And if you are a stakeholder-centered coaching certified coach, you can get that inside of your SCC portal right now. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. My guest, Chester Elton, thank you so much for joining us today on this episode of Conversations with Coaches to share this amazing book chapter. You can find all the links to Chester's social, email, and website in the description below. This has been another episode of our series, Conversations with Coaches by Stakeholder-Centered Coaching, where we believe everyone deserves a stakeholder-centered leader. Thank you for joining this conversation, and until next time, keep learning, keep improving, and keep taking your coaching skills to the next level. Thank you for being my guest today, Chester.
You know what, Brendan? It was a delight. It really was. You can call me anytime. I would be delighted to come back. I would be delighted for us to off camera just chat. I love the work you're doing. You're making a difference. So from me to you, thank you.
Thank you, Chester. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you next time for Conversations with Coaches.